My name is Clara, but everyone calls me Clary, and I'm 58 years old. I thought I knew my son better than anyone in the world. That morning, I decided to pull a little stunt hide in his car and surprise him on his way to work. It seemed harmless, almost playful, just a small thing to remind him that I was still around, still paying attention, still his mum. I clutched the small gift I had carefully wrapped for him, a leather keychain with a tiny note tucked inside, my handwriting messy but full of love. I crouched behind the driver's seat, heart racing with excitement and a twinge of mischief. I imagined his laugh, his surprise, the warmth in his eyes when he saw me, but when I peeked over the seat my stomach dropped and my world tilted sideways. There he was, yes, my son, but sitting beside him was someone I never expected to see, a woman I barely recognized, her hand brushing against his, her laugh easy and intimate, the kind of laugh that belonged in a different story, not mine. I froze, the small gift still clutched in my trembling hands. My chest ached, my mind scrambled. Was this real? Had I imagined her before? My heart thudded painfully as betrayal sliced through me like cold glass. That keychain, that note, my carefully planned surprise. It suddenly felt like a relic from another life, a symbol of a love I wasn't sure still existed. And in that moment I realized nothing would ever feel the same again. Every morning, I followed the same little rituals, the kind that give life a sense of order when you're edging toward retirement. I'd make my coffee just the way I liked it, strong, with a splash of cream, stirring it slowly while standing by the kitchen window, watching the sunlight glint on the dew-dappled lawn. My little garden beyond the fence was starting to bloom in earnest, tulips and daffodils nodding their heads in the breeze, and I often told myself that gardening kept me grounded, gave me a reason to move, to bend, to breathe. After coffee, I'd usually take a walk down the lane, waving to neighbors who were either heading to work or tending to their own gardens. There was Mrs. Henderson, the retired teacher who always offered me a smile and a plate of scones if she'd baked that morning, and Mr. Callahan, the man who always seemed grumpy but tipped his hat anyway. Familiarity has its comfort, I suppose, and I clung to it, especially as I navigated the quiet ache of living alone. I had my son, of course. Liam. My pride and my constant, though lately he had become a little more distant. He'd brush past me in the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, barely noticing my presence. Sometimes I would catch him glancing at me as if I were a stranger, and I'd feel that familiar tightening in my chest. He had been my anchor for so many years after my husband passed. Oh, Michael, my love, whose watch I still wore every day on my wrist, the face scratched but precious. He was gone too soon, and ever since, Liam and I had been navigating this world together, just the two of us. I worked hard to keep our life ordinary, predictable. Grocery trips became a rhythm, choosing apples that weren't too bruised, hunting for the bread Liam liked, occasionally splurging on a chocolate bar for myself when the checkout clerk wasn't looking. Those small gestures felt important. They were my way of asserting care, of marking the life I wanted for us, even if he barely noticed. Our home was modest but full of memories. A framed photo of Liam and me from his 10th birthday sat on the mantel, showing him grinning with chocolate smeared across his face while I laughed, holding a cake that was already starting to lean dangerously to one side. That photo had been my anchor too, a reminder of the simple, unbreakable bond we'd shared. I glance at it often, especially on mornings when the silence of the house pressed down on me like a weight I couldn't quite lift. I had friends too, though not many, mostly women from the gardening club or my book group who would meet every Thursday afternoon in the community center. We'd talk about the latest novel, debate whose roses were blooming best, or share news about grandchildren and grandchildren's troubles. There was a warmth there, a reassurance that life didn't always have to be lonely. Yet even among friends, I sometimes felt a small, unplaceable tension, a reminder that not everything in my life was as it seemed. Letters would arrive in the post sometimes, unopened because I didn't want to face the mundanity or the potential stress they carried. Bills mostly, occasionally reminders from the bank or insurance. Liam would sometimes peek over my shoulder, offering a brief, "You sure you want to leave that?" And I'd nod, pretending I didn't notice the way his brow furrowed, as if even he sensed the subtle shifts in our household, the silences that were growing heavier. And then there were the small, almost invisible signs that foreshadowed the coming shock. The glances Liam would give his phone a little too quickly, the hurried nods when I asked how his day had been, the way he sometimes seemed to drift into his own thoughts while sitting beside me at breakfast. None of these were dramatic, none were loud or confrontational, but they settled into my bones, nagging at me. Something was off, though I couldn't have said what. Perhaps I wanted it to be nothing more than my imagination running wild. Perhaps I feared the truth before it even arrived. Symbols became a private language in my life, things that reminded me of love, of continuity, of identity. Michael's watch on my wrist was one. The gold ring I wore every day, a wedding gift, another. And, of course, the photo of Liam and me on the mantel. They grounded me, kept me tethered to a version of life I thought was unshakable. Little did I know, those symbols would later serve as bittersweet reminders of everything I thought I knew and cherished. I had my routines: morning coffee, walks, small chats with neighbors, quiet moments tending to the flowers. I planned for retirement carefully, thinking about how I wanted the coming years to feel safe, dignified, and meaningful. I saved, budgeted, wrote lists of things to do, places to see. My life had its order, its small pleasures. And yet, beneath that careful structure, a quiet tension simmered. I could feel it, like a faint tremor in the foundation of a house that seemed otherwise solid. Closeness with Liam had always been my greatest joy, yet I noticed cracks forming, subtle ones at first, slight avoidance of eye contact, phone calls that ended abruptly, his occasional impatience over small matters. I told myself it was normal, part of growing older, part of becoming independent. Still, sometimes I caught myself wondering if I truly knew him anymore, if the bond we'd nurtured for decades could withstand the invisible pressures creeping into our lives. In those ordinary days, there was warmth, yes. Love, yes. Routine, yes. But under it all, a small unease threaded through every gesture: the folded laundry, the coffee sipped too slowly, the letters left unopened. Life seemed ordinary, but the signals were there, small, almost imperceptible, until that morning when I hid in the car, the gift clutched in my hands, and realized that all those subtle signs had been pointing to something I was not ready to face. The watch ticked softly on my wrist as I polished the leather keychain I had planned to surprise Liam with. That small token felt heavier that morning, a symbol not just of affection, but of the fragile line between trust and betrayal. I couldn't have known that by the end of the day, it would take on a weight far heavier than I ever imagined. I had thought of it all morning, rehearsed it in my head a dozen times. Hide in the car, wait for Liam to get in, then jump out with a laugh, a hug, and that little gift I had wrapped so carefully, the leather keychain with the note tucked inside. My heart fluttered as I crouched behind the driver's seat, trying not to make a sound, trying not to betray the excitement that had me practically vibrating in place. The faint aroma of leather from the keychain mixed with the lingering scent of his coffee cup on the dashboard. Everything seemed ordinary, familiar. The steering wheel worn just so, the upholstery slightly faded, the morning sunlight filtering in through the windshield. Then I saw him, Liam. My son, my boy. And beside him, a woman. Someone I barely knew, yet she looked impossibly comfortable, leaning slightly toward him, her hand brushing his arm. She laughed at something he said, a laugh that belonged in another life, a laugh that belonged with someone else. My stomach dropped. My chest tightened. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, pounding so hard it seemed to echo against the car doors. I couldn't breathe. For a second, I thought it was some cruel trick of the light, that maybe I was imagining her. But no. The perfume, faint but unmistakable, the way she tilted her head toward him, the soft murmur of her voice, it was all real. Every tiny detail stabbed me in the chest, every movement they made, a betrayal I hadn't prepared for. I gripped the keychain tightly in my hand, the note crumpling slightly between my fingers. My words, my love, meant to surprise him, now felt grotesquely out of place, an echo of a bond I wasn't sure still existed. My mind raced. How long had this been happening? Why hadn't I seen it? Was I blind all these years? My stomach churned with nausea and disbelief, and yet a part of me refused to believe it could be true. I strained to hear their conversation, hoping I'd misinterpreted something, that there was some innocent explanation. But the soft laughter, the familiarity in the way they leaned toward each other, the ease in her voice, it spoke of intimacy, comfort, a closeness that made my heart fracture in a way I didn't think possible. I could feel the tears threatening to spill, but I forced them back, blinking rapidly, my knuckles white from gripping the keychain. Everything I had imagined for this morning, the joy, the laughter, the simple happiness of seeing him, was gone, replaced by a raw, painful clarity that shattered the ordinary, safe world I had built around us. In that moment, I questioned everything I thought I knew about my son. Was he the same boy who once held my hand on stormy nights? The boy who whispered secrets only I could hear? Or had he grown into someone I no longer recognized, someone capable of hiding parts of his life from me? My mind spun with questions, accusations, and disbelief, each one sharper than the last. The small gift in my hand suddenly felt like a relic from another life, a symbol of innocence and love, now juxtaposed painfully against the betrayal I was witnessing. The note I had written, full of warmth and encouragement, seemed almost cruel in its timing. It was meant to remind him of our bond, to surprise him with affection, but now it felt like a testament to the distance that had quietly grown between us, unnoticed until this very second. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to vanish and forget I had ever seen this, but I couldn't. I was frozen in place, heart hammering, mind spinning, trapped behind the seat in my son's car, a silent witness to something I wasn't ready to confront. That keychain, that note, my carefully planned surprise. Everything I had thought was a small gesture of love had collided violently with a truth I hadn't been prepared to see. And in that quiet, sunlit car, surrounded by ordinary smells and the faint hum of the engine, I realized that my world had shifted irreversibly. Nothing would ever feel the same again. After that morning in the car, nothing felt normal. I tried to go about my day, make tea, water the garden, tidy the living room, but every movement felt hollow, every sound made me jump. I found myself replaying the scene over and over in my mind, as if watching it on a loop might somehow change what I had seen. Liam laughing, the way her hand brushed his arm, the easy intimacy between them. It clung to me like smoke. I began to watch him more closely, though I told myself I wasn't spying. At breakfast, I lingered in the kitchen doorway while he poured cereal, pretending to read the newspaper. I noticed the quick glance at his phone, the subtle stiffening of his shoulders when I entered the room. Small things I had always brushed off suddenly felt loaded with meaning. The way he avoided eye contact, the little smiles he gave that seemed meant for someone else. I felt a prickling tension in my chest each time. The first day, I told myself I was imagining it. Maybe I was being overprotective, over-emotional. But by the second day, I found myself leaning against the living room wall, pretending to dust the shelves while listening to his phone conversation from the hallway. I couldn't make out every word, but laughter, soft and familiar, floated through the crack under the door. My pulse raced, and my stomach twisted into knots. I started checking messages on his tablet when he left it unattended. I felt guilty, almost sick with guilt, yet I couldn't stop. Every unread notification, every quick glance at a text, seemed like a tiny clue to the puzzle I was desperate and terrified to solve. There were harmless things, mostly reminders about work, yet a few made my heart seize, shorthand notes, inside jokes I didn't understand, affectionate emojis that weren't meant for me. Each one hammered the point home. There was a part of his life I had never been invited into, a part I wasn't supposed to see. Sleepless nights became routine. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying conversations, gestures, and small, seemingly insignificant interactions. Had he always been this secretive? Was this new? My mind churned with questions I had no answers for. Sometimes I caught myself pacing the hallway, hand brushing over the mantel where the photo of him and me sat. That photo, so full of love and memory, suddenly felt fragile. Like everything I had believed about our bond might be slipping through my fingers. I started leaving small things around intentionally, testing reactions. A note on the fridge, casually mentioning an errand. A message left on his voicemail. I watched for a response, any hint of deception. When he failed to mention it or brushed it off with a quick nod, my anxiety spiked. How long had he been hiding parts of his life from me? How long had I missed the subtle signs? Every tiny omission felt like proof piling up against me. Even when he left the house, I would peek through the window, trying to see patterns in his interactions, noticing who he met, what time he returned. It was exhausting, but I couldn't stop. The keychain and note I had intended as a gift became a touchstone. I would hold it in my hand during these investigations, the leather smooth against my palm, and remind myself of the innocence of that morning, the hope, the love. Before, it had collided with betrayal. Other small details haunted me. A receipt from a cafe I didn't know about, a stray lipstick mark on a cup he left behind, a soft laugh that drifted through the hall as he spoke to friends on the phone. These were ordinary things, but to me they took on a weight I couldn't dismiss. Each one whispered possibilities I wasn't ready to hear. My thoughts became a maze I could not escape, a constant tension between what I wanted to believe and the evidence that was stacking up. I began writing little notes to myself, trying to piece together a timeline, jotting down times, places, gestures. I marked them with question marks, underlined words, little arrows connecting one event to another. My handwriting, usually neat, became jagged with the stress of sleepless nights and constant worry. Yet even with all this effort, I still felt blind in some ways, unable to see the whole truth, and the uncertainty gnawed at me. Sometimes I caught him in moments I hadn't noticed before, a subtle glance toward the phone when I entered the room, a quick smile at someone I couldn't see, gestures that hinted at intimacy. Each one was a sting, each one a reminder that he was no longer fully mine, not in the way he had been. I questioned myself constantly. Was I being paranoid, overly dramatic, or was there really something I had to face? I also began to notice myself changing. The quiet confidence I had carried in daily life, my steady routines, my sense of control, was giving way to tension and hyper-awareness. I flinched at unexpected noises, replayed casual remarks over and over in my mind, and held my breath when he entered the room unexpectedly. Every little clue, every minor omission, became a thread I pulled at, desperate to see the fabric of truth beneath it all. Through it all, the keychain remained in my hand, the note tucked inside, folded carefully, untouched. It was both a comfort and a reminder, a symbol of what I had tried to give him that morning and the contrast of what I was discovering now. It connected my love with my pain, my hope with my growing suspicion. Every time I held it, I felt the sharp sting of betrayal mingle with the warmth of what had once been, the push and pull of conflicting emotions that refused to let me rest. By the end of that week, I was exhausted, fragile, and perpetually on edge. Every interaction, every glance, every unanswered question added to a mounting pile of tension that I couldn't ignore. The ordinary rhythms of life, coffee, gardening, walks, chores, continued outwardly unchanged, but inside me, a storm had begun. A storm that promised that nothing would ever feel simple or safe again, and that the next revelation might shatter me completely. It was late one evening, the house quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of Michael's old watch on my wrist. I had spent the day replaying every detail of the previous week, the glances, the messages, the laughter I had overheard. My mind refused to settle. And then, by chance, I stumbled upon a clue I hadn't expected. Liam had left his laptop open on the kitchen table, a document half finished. At first, I hesitated, my fingers hovering above the keys. I knew I shouldn't, but I couldn't stop myself. Curiosity, worry, and something darker, fear, pulled me forward. The document wasn't what I feared entirely, but it wasn't innocent either. It was an email draft addressed to a small business liaison, but in it, he referred repeatedly to meetings with someone I recognized from that morning. Her name appeared several times, and the tone of the notes, casual, intimate, made my chest tighten. Yet it wasn't the betrayal I had imagined in full. She wasn't explicitly mentioned as a romantic partner. The words suggested collaboration, time spent together, personal favors exchanged. There was something off, yes, but there was also ambiguity. I sank into the chair, holding the leather keychain and the note I had meant to give him. The contrast stung sharply. I had planned to surprise him with a token of love and affection. Instead, I held evidence of a part of his life that had been hidden from me, a part I wasn't sure I wanted to fully confront yet. The next day, I tried to approach him gently. "Liam, can we talk for a minute?" My voice was steady, but my heart raced. He looked up from his cereal, startled. "Sure, Mum." "What's up?" There it was again, the casual ease, the way he didn't meet my eyes for longer than a second. I noticed your laptop was open last night," I began, choosing my words carefully. "I saw some of your notes about the meetings." My voice faltered slightly. He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "Oh, that. It's nothing, really. Just work stuff. Just business meetings." But I could hear the pause, the slight catch in his voice. Something unsaid lingered between us, like a thin thread I wasn't allowed to pull. I felt a mixture of relief and confusion. Maybe my fears weren't fully justified, but something was still wrong, and that uncertainty was almost worse than certainty. I glanced at the keychain and note again, a small object that suddenly felt weighty with significance. I placed it on the counter beside him. "I thought you might like this," I said softly. "Just a small thing, from me." Liam's eyes flicked toward it, then away, his expression unreadable. He didn't comment, didn't take it. That moment, so ordinary on the surface, hit me like a wave. Here was my gift, my attempt at love and connection, lying there unused, ignored, as if it didn't exist in the world he was quietly building away from me. Conflicting emotions roared inside me, a stab of betrayal, a flicker of hope, a wave of denial. Maybe it wasn't what I feared. Maybe I had misjudged him. But then, the shadow of doubt crept in, whispering that there were things I wasn't seeing, things hidden beneath layers of casual words and gestures. Later that evening, I found myself staring at the framed photo of Liam and me on the mantel, chocolate smeared across his cheeks, my arms wrapped around him in laughter. That memory, that captured joy, felt suddenly fragile, like a glass ornament teetering on the edge of a shelf. Could our bond survive this quiet secrecy? Could it withstand the parts of his life that had been kept from me? I realized then that the first reveal wasn't about fully uncovering betrayal. It was about the cracks, the partial truths that made my world wobble. I knew enough to feel shaken, unsure, and wary, yet not enough to confront the full reality. My love for him and my fear of losing him were tangled together in a tight, painful knot. Holding the keychain again, I made a silent vow to myself. I would uncover the truth piece by piece, no matter how painful it might be. But I also realized that, for now, I had to navigate this fragile middle ground, the partial revelation, the uncertainty, the mix of hope and hurt before the full storm hit. And so I waited, heart tense, mind racing, sensing that the next discovery would change everything, that the small gift in my hand was no longer just a symbol of affection, but a quiet beacon pointing me toward the truth I needed to confront. After that partial revelation, Liam's behavior shifted in ways that made my chest tighten with unease. It wasn't dramatic or obvious. He didn't shout or slam doors, but there were subtle changes that set off alarms I couldn't ignore. He became careful, guarded, sometimes overly polite in a way that felt rehearsed. Conversations that had once been easy now carried a strange tension, a kind of precision that felt calculated. One evening I confronted him gently. "Liam, can we be honest with each other? I just want to understand." My voice trembled, though I tried to keep it steady. He looked at me for a long moment, and then a slow smile curved his lips. "Clary, you worry too much." "You always do. I'm fine." "You don't need to read into everything." It was a casual dismissal, but the effect was immediate. My heart sank, the way someone might sink in cold water. I wanted to argue, to demand honesty, but I found myself hesitating. His words had the precision of someone practiced in turning the conversation, deflecting without confrontation. It was manipulation, subtle and insidious, and I hated that it worked so well on me. Even as he left for work, I noticed the faint perfume she had worn that morning lingering on his jacket. A small, almost invisible reminder that the tension I felt was real. I touched the wedding ring on my finger instinctively, feeling its cool weight, grounding myself. The photo of Liam and me on the mantel became a silent witness to my frustration and fear, a symbol of the bond I wasn't sure could survive this subtle encroachment. I started noticing patterns. She was present more often in stories he told casually, lunches, errands, small errands that seemed innocent on the surface, but my gut twisted with suspicion. Each detail, each casual mention, felt like a calculated brushstroke painting a picture I wasn't supposed to see. I felt cornered, trapped between wanting to preserve dignity and the need to confront the truth. I tried to assert control. I asked small questions about his day, watched interactions closely, noted inconsistencies. Yet every attempt to uncover clarity seemed to be met with plausible excuses, gentle laughter, the kind of reassurance that made my heart twist with doubt. Was I imagining things? Was I overreacting? That uncertainty was crueler than certainty. It left me teetering between fear and hope. Sleep became a challenge. I would lie awake in the dark, holding the keychain I had planned to give him, running scenarios through my head. How could I protect myself emotionally without pushing him away completely? How could I assert boundaries without shattering what remained of trust between us? These questions haunted me night after night. Even small moments of ordinary life became charged with tension. Grocery store trips, once routine, were now exercises in vigilance. Watching him handle simple interactions, I would search for signs, gestures, tones, or pauses that revealed more than he intended. Each hint, each nuance, stoked the fire of anxiety in me, leaving me drained yet determined. The emotional stakes had escalated. I felt a profound fear, not just of losing him, but of being replaced, of being rendered irrelevant in his life by someone I didn't understand. Yet even in the face of this, a flicker of inner strength persisted. I reminded myself that I had raised him, loved him, guided him. My instincts, though frayed, were rooted in truth and experience. I found myself returning to the symbols that anchored me: the wedding ring on my finger, Michael's watch ticking on my wrist, the framed photo of Liam and me. They reminded me of the history I carried, of the trust I had built over decades, and of the love that remained, no matter how fractured things seemed now. They were small defenses against the creeping doubt that threatened to overtake me. One afternoon, I noticed a letter left on the kitchen counter, addressed to Liam. I picked it up, feeling the smooth paper beneath my fingers, and hesitated. I wasn't proud of it, but I read it anyway. It was short, polite, and banal on the surface. But a few words, a familiar tone, hinted at meetings and exchanges I hadn't been aware of. Each line was a spark, fanning the flames of my anxiety, confirming that my suspicions weren't entirely baseless. I confronted him again, carefully, trying to maintain composure. "I just want honesty, Liam. I need to understand what's happening." He smiled, faint and disarming. "Clary, you worry too much. Everything's fine. Trust me." His words felt like a challenge and a shield at the same time. I could sense the subtle gaslighting, the deliberate redirection that made me doubt my own perception. But beneath it all, I clung to the memory of our bond, to the keychain I had held the morning of the surprise, to the small symbols of love and trust that I carried with me. They reminded me that I had a right to stand firm, even as I felt vulnerable and cornered. By the end of the week, the tension had become almost unbearable. Every glance, every gesture, every word was loaded with possibility. I felt caught between confronting him fully, risking his anger or denial, and protecting my dignity, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy. My heart ached with betrayal, but my mind, sharpened by years of experience, refused to let me be passive. I began to realize that strength wasn't about eliminating vulnerability. It was about moving forward despite it. I would continue to watch, to listen, to gather evidence, to hold on to the symbols that grounded me, and to prepare myself for the moment when confrontation was inevitable. Because I knew deep down that the truth, once fully revealed, would demand action, and I needed to be ready. The day finally arrived when I could no longer contain the storm inside me. I had spent weeks pacing, listening, observing, holding on to Michael's watch, the wedding ring on my finger, and the small keychain with the note tucked inside, as if they could anchor me against the tide of doubt and suspicion. I had rehearsed countless conversations in my head, imagining every possible reaction from Liam. And yet, when the moment came, none of that preparation mattered. I found him in the kitchen, the sunlight slanting through the blinds and falling across the counter where he sipped his coffee. The woman from that morning was not there, but her presence lingered like a shadow. I clutched the keychain, feeling the weight of the leather and the note inside. "Liam," I said, my voice firm but trembling, "we need to talk, now." He looked up, startled, and for the first time in weeks, I saw hesitation in his eyes. He nodded slowly. "Okay, Mum. Let's talk." We moved to the living room where the framed photo of us from his 10th birthday sat silently on the mantel. I gestured toward it, my hand shaking slightly. "Do you see this, Liam? This is us. I thought we shared everything. I thought I knew you." He swallowed hard, running a hand through his hair. "Clary, No, don't start with excuses," I interrupted, my voice rising. "I saw her in the car. I saw how close you two were. I've been trying to make sense of everything, and I need the truth, not a half-truth. Not a partial explanation." His expression faltered, and then, finally, the walls he had carefully constructed began to crumble. "Mum, it's not what you think," he said quietly, almost pleading. "I didn't want you to find out this way, but she's my mentor. She's helping me with work, with projects, and yes, we've spent time together. But nothing romantic." I blinked rapidly, the room tilting slightly. "Nothing? Then why? The laughter, the hand on your arm?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "It looked comfort," he said firmly. "It's comfort and respect. She's like family, Clary. I swear." I sank into the armchair, keychain still clutched tightly. My chest heaved with a mix of relief and residual hurt. Relief that the betrayal I had feared in full wasn't real, and hurt because my imagination had run so far ahead of reality. I don't know what to believe anymore," I admitted, voice breaking. Every little sign I saw, it felt like my world was shattering. Liam sat across from me, leaning forward. "Mum, I should have told you sooner." "I know that. I wanted to protect you from worrying. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now it only made it worse. I never meant to hurt you." I stared down at the keychain and note. I had carried it around all week, a symbol of my love and the hope I still held for our bond. I placed it gently in his hands. "I wanted to give you this," I said, my voice soft but resonant. "I wanted to surprise you, remind you that I care. And yet, it feels like it's meaningless now, because I doubted you, because I doubted us." He took it, his fingers brushing mine. "It's not meaningless, Mum, not at all. I know now that I should have shared everything with you, and I promise I will. You've always been my anchor. Always." For a moment, the tension in the room seemed to lift, the sharp edges of fear and suspicion softening slightly. But the aftermath of weeks of doubt, sleepless nights, and constant anxiety lingered. I realized that my pain wasn't just about what I had imagined. It was about the fragile trust that had been shaken, the fear of being replaced, the insecurity that had quietly crept into my life without my noticing. I stood up and walked to the mantel, fingers brushing over the frame of our photo. "Do you see this, Liam? Do you see what we've built? Do you see the love, the memories?" My voice caught in my throat. "I want that back. I want the trust back, but I need honesty. Every time." He nodded, eyes glistening. "I understand, Mum. I promise. You'll always be the most important person in my life." I took a deep breath, letting the weight of weeks of tension slowly ease. There was still a shadow of hurt, yes, a scar from the fear and doubt that had consumed me. But there was also clarity, a sense of what mattered, of the resilience that existed between us. The symbols I had clung to, the keychain, the note, the photo, the ring, the watch. They were no longer just reminders of what I feared losing. They were reminders of the strength and love that could endure even through fear and uncertainty. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to relax, to feel the warmth of his presence, the sound of his voice in a tone of sincerity and love. "Clary," Liam said softly, "I never meant to make you feel like you weren't enough. You're everything to me. You always will be." Tears sprang to my eyes, but they were not only tears of hurt, they were tears of release. Shock, heartbreak, anger, and relief swirled together, leaving a raw, honest clarity. I realized then that love and trust were not fragile because they could be broken. They were precious because they could endure trials, misunderstandings, and fear. I smiled faintly, reaching for his hand and squeezing it. I've worried too much, maybe, I admitted. But I'll do better too. I'll try to trust you more, to let go of the fear. He smiled back, and for the first time in weeks, the room felt lighter, safer, real again. I knew that healing would take time, that the shadow of suspicion might linger, but I also knew that our bond, tested as it had been, was strong enough to survive. The gift, the note, the symbols I had carried, they had not lost their meaning. They had only gained depth, a testament to enduring love, resilience, and the ability to confront fear and misunderstanding with honesty. And as I sat there, holding his hand, I realized that even in moments of near betrayal, clarity, truth, and connection could shine through. The confrontation had not erased the pain of the past weeks, but it had transformed it. It had delivered the truth, however complicated, and offered the possibility of moving forward. The emotional storm that had threatened to consume me now left behind a quiet, steady strength, proof that even the deepest fear and suspicion could be met with courage and the enduring power of love. In the days following our confrontation, life began to regain its rhythm, though not without deliberate effort. Liam and I spoke more openly than we had in years, sharing moments of honesty, questions, and laughter that had been absent during the weeks of tension. The relief was palpable, but I also recognized that trust, once shaken, needed time and care to rebuild. It was not an instant fix, it was a slow weaving back together of our bond. The woman, his mentor, stopped visiting so frequently, a fact I accepted with quiet acknowledgement. I never confronted her directly, but the boundaries Liam and I established were respected without drama. That, in itself, felt like poetic justice. The intrusion that had caused so much doubt now receded without argument or escalation. She faced her own realization too, I sensed. Her role in my son's life would always be professional, and any overstepping would be met with the firmness of a mother who had spent decades teaching resilience. I found myself walking through the small rituals I had held on to during the ordeal with renewed intention. My morning coffee tasted sweeter, the sunlight glinting off the dew-dappled garden more vivid. Even the keychain and note I had carried through the storm now felt lighter, imbued with a richer meaning. I tucked the note into the drawer, a small reminder of how far we had come, and gifted Liam the keychain finally, without hesitation or anxiety. He smiled, truly smiled, as he held it in his hand, and in that moment I felt a surge of pride and relief. The framed photo on the mantel, the one with chocolate-smeared faces and laughter frozen in time, took on a renewed significance. It was no longer just a memory of a joyful day, it was a symbol of endurance, of the bond that had weathered doubt and uncertainty. I polished the frame one afternoon, lingering on Liam's face in the picture, and silently promised that I would continue to nurture the trust we had rebuilt. It was a quiet act, almost meditative, a recognition that care and attention sustain love as much as words ever could. In our small community, whispers and curiosities had a way of traveling faster than the truth. Yet, when friends from the gardening club or book group visited, I noticed a subtle shift in myself. I no longer carried the anxiety or secrecy that had shadowed me. Instead, I projected calm confidence. Conversations flowed easily, laughter returned. I even shared small anecdotes of the misunderstanding with Liam, framed lightly, without shame, as lessons in trust and the importance of honesty. People nodded, some offering empathy, others quietly admiring the grace with which I had navigated a difficult situation. I also realized that my own boundaries had strengthened. I could love fully without sacrificing my dignity. When Liam's friends or colleagues asked questions about the past weeks, I answered simply, firmly, without oversharing or apologizing for my reactions. The ordeal had reminded me that clarity, honesty, and a quiet assertion of oneself are far more powerful than panic or suspicion. Michael's watch continued to tick on my wrist each morning, a reminder of enduring love and the life I had built, even in the face of heartbreak. The ring I wore every day felt heavier, not in weight, but in significance. It symbolized the constancy of my own identity, the integrity I refused to compromise, and the patience required to navigate human relationships. One evening, Liam and I sat together on the couch, the sun setting through the living room windows. He reached for the keychain, turning it over in his hands. "I'll always keep this," he said softly, "not just because of what it is, but because of what it means." I nodded, squeezing his hand gently. And I'll always trust you, Liam, even when it's hard. That's what matters. The tension that had once felt suffocating had dissolved, replaced with a sense of calm empowerment. I recognized that while fear and doubt had their place as warnings, they could no longer govern my actions. I had faced uncertainty, confronted it, and emerged stronger, more confident in my love and in the bonds that truly mattered. Poetic justice had taken its quiet course. The woman who had inadvertently caused the storm had stepped back, leaving space for the natural order to restore itself. Liam had confronted his own missteps, acknowledged them, and strengthened his relationship with me in ways that were tangible and lasting. And I, Clary, had reclaimed my dignity, my trust, and my sense of agency. Even my small rituals, coffee, gardening, walks, took on a new depth. Each step felt deliberate, a celebration of the clarity I had earned through patience, observation, and courage. I smiled more freely, laughed without restraint, and felt the subtle but undeniable strength of knowing that I could endure challenges without losing myself. The keychain, the note, the photo, the ring, the watch, they had all played their part. Once symbols of uncertainty, they now stood as reminders of endurance, honesty, and love that could withstand even the most unsettling storms. I had confronted betrayal, navigated fear, and reclaimed trust, and in doing so, had strengthened the foundation of my life. As the evening light softened across the room, I felt a quiet contentment settle over me. The conflict had passed, boundaries had been respected, and our bond had endured. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but I also knew that I, Clary, could meet them with grace, resilience, and love that was unwavering. Sitting here now, reflecting on everything that happened, I realize how fragile trust can feel, and yet how resilient it truly is when handled with care. I learned that love doesn't mean surrendering your dignity, and that fear or suspicion, while natural, should never rule your actions. What matters is honesty, patience, and the courage to face uncomfortable truths, even when your heart is trembling. Holding on to symbols, the keychain, the note, the photo, reminded me of the love and memories that anchored me. They weren't just objects, they were reminders of what had been, what could endure, and the strength we carry within us to navigate life's unexpected storms. I learned that boundaries are not walls but bridges, necessary for protection, but also for fostering trust and connection. Through this, I discovered that confrontation, when done with honesty and calm, can restore relationships rather than destroy them. I also realized that forgiveness, paired with vigilance and self-respect, is a powerful act of courage. So, here I am, sharing my story with you, not because it's extraordinary, but because it's real. We all face moments of doubt, betrayal, or fear in our relationships, and it's how we respond that shapes the outcome. I want to ask you, sincerely, what would you have done in my place? How would you balance love, trust, and dignity when everything you thought you knew is called into question? Think about it, because the strength we need often comes from the very moments that test us the most.